a scream rings out in the night, and you suddenly find yourself standing in front of a door, a locked door, and on the other side, a traumatic experience about to unfold. It's 9 years old, and all I can remember of this event is a flash of a crime scene camera. And this begets a journey of one kind or another that I believe all ties in together in a way that has informed my philosophy of living, as well as what I would call my morality, if you will. So, we're going to begin a little journey in this conversation of questing the unknown. We're going to dip and dive, and I'm going to take you on a ride into some ideas and why they matter and why they're important. I'm saying the philosophy that would save the world, a conversation about rape, veganism, murder, and manipulation of minds. Now, it's not what you think yet. So I'm not talking about the rape of animals, so on and so forth. I'm talking about the rape of human animals. And an experience that I had, and in this experience, I think in many ways it informed certain decisions and choices that I've come to make in life, and a way of seeing each other, every living being, particularly humans though, particularly women and children. And this is going to be a conversation between you and me around those ideas, that realm of existence, so on and so forth. So I'm going to share something with you. It's not a secret. People who know me and have had conversations with me know what happened. Not all, but this is the story. And I'm just going to let it unravel as it will. So I have to work my way around it in a particular way because there are certain blank spots in my mind, in my memory, that I can't get to. I've tried to understand and remember, but I can't find them. So what I can remember, and this is where the story begins for me, and I'm going to backfill it for you. I was 9.5 years old. My parents had just gotten separated. It's maybe been a month or two. My dad was living miles away and with my other sister, with one of my sisters. My other sister and I were living and staying with my mom in their house in Phoenix, Arizona. And one night, I found myself standing hand in hand with my sister in front of my mom's bedroom door, which was locked. And I don't remember if my sister knocked, if I knocked, if we were crying or what was going on. I just remember standing there. And the door was locked and we couldn't get in, and it opened, and my mom was standing on the other side with blood dripping down her naked body. This is a memory I have. I don't remember what happens between then and standing in her bedroom. The police had arrived, and the crime scene photographer was taking pictures of the bed. And I remember seeing the flash. And the camera at that time was as if you were in the movies when they would flash, and it was this bright round bulb. And it would just like super bright, blind you for a second. But I remember it echoing off of the room and hit the mirror behind the bed, flashing into my eyes. And I, the whole time, just observing it. I don't remember the emotions toward it or anything like this. So there you are. Standing in this situation, not knowing really what happened, and then living life not really ever being able to recall a clean memory of it. Or memory is fallible in this regard. So what do? We piece together the stories from the stories that we were told or shared. And so here's the story of that situation. As I said, my parents had been separated for a little bit, and somebody came into the house late in the evening and went into my mom's bedroom and He was standing 20 feet away from the bed, and my mom woke up and thought it was my dad. And she said my dad's name, and the guy responded by running and jumping on top of her. And he was naked, and he was attempting to rape her, and she let out a blistering scream. And this was heard apparently like half a mile away. Neighbors way far off in the distance heard it. The dog was outside. We had this beautiful Austrian shepherd, was going crazy trying to get into the room. And so she screamed, she let out the scream, and it just like flew across the neighborhood, and it freaked the guy out. And she went to reach back. This is where the scream came. She went to reach back to turn the light on when he was attacking her, and then he pushed her back, and her head slammed against the headboard. And when that happened, that's when she let out that scream, and it frightened him so much that apparently he ran out the other door in her room that goes to the outside and ran off. And that's the story. That's what happened. And the police came, and they found a pair of purple Nikes out in the yard. Apparently that were his. And that's it. And there I was, 9.5, 10 years old, experiencing this with my sister, who is 4 years older than I. That memory dropped somewhere into my emotional being, if you will, into my brain, into my mind, whatever the case may be. So I'm going to leave it there for a moment and talk about this in some regard, because the actual thing that happened is so unknown for me. But I won't leave you hanging, because you might want to know a little bit more of this story. It appears, well, this is what happened. We left a key in our carport because we have an open door policy at our house where kids could come over, friends, so on and so forth. And oftentimes when there was somebody who was having trouble at home, they could stay with us. So my parents had this policy where they just were helpful in that regard, and so creating a safe environment. So we would keep a key under a doormat in our carport, which is an open carport. And it's believed that one of the gardener's helper saw this, and he went and made a copy when everybody was gone, and that's how he was able to get into the house. So he made a copy, put the original back, and then he was able to let himself in. What's wild about this, and this is where things get a little bit strange. Oh, it all gets strange. So he apparently either a month earlier or weeks earlier or sometime earlier, I don't remember exactly when, could have been much earlier. We had a friend staying, and she was 18 years old, and she was having trouble at her home, and her mom's really good friends with my mom, so she was like, hey, she can come stay with us. You know, she's an adult, 18 years old, whatever the case may be. Well, one night when she was home alone, she walked into the kitchen at midnight, and there was a guy standing in there, and she's barefoot. They just stopped and looked at each other, and she ran out the door, and he ran the other way, and she ran miles barefoot to where my dad lives. I didn't hear this story until later on. And of course, you're not going to tell the 9-year-old, 10-year-old kid this. So let's just say we leave it there, and you might be asking questions like, well, did you ever talk? I never talked to anybody about it. We talked about it in our family, like barely. It was not a secret or anything like this, but I never like went and talked to or got anyone like professional help or something to talk to anybody about, say this, so sort of what would be a traumatic event. And I have to imagine it was so for me. I mean, how do you hear these screams, which I can't remember, but I'm sure I heard it. And then there I am with my sister standing at the door, and the door opens, and your mom just got blood dripping down her naked body, like from head to toe. She had when she got hit her head on the back of the headboard on her bed, it opened up a slit, and just blood just oozed from her. To take this and to play with this and to understand this and to see, for one, the power with my mom, you know, she dealt with it very well. So I cannot tell you. I have no idea like how it affected me, but I can tell you how it did affect me. So this is an interesting thing that I'm sharing with you. As for my sister, who is 14, I'm not sure how it affected her either, actually. It's one of those things where I feel in some way now, and we'll talk more about this as I'm going through this conversation with you about rape, abuse, power and manipulation of others, and using your power over others, and why this is all connected. But these things became a story for us, right? For me, now, this is so many years later, it's a story. It's just a story, and we put the parts together and we construct a story. So I just shared with you a story from my perspective, which is missing and has a bunch of holes in it. So I who knows what happened? Like, I could hypothesize about things. Sometimes I wish to be hypnotically regressed just to know what went on during that period of time, because I can't remember. I don't remember. So nevertheless, but this is just the story, and it carried a particular, choosing my words carefully here, it birthed a kind of, a question, it birthed a fear and anxiety in me that I was not able to remove for a long time. So I wanted to share that with you because it's kind of curious to me, and a lot of people don't know this. So by the way, when I have conversations with people, right? So here you and I are talking about this, having this conversation, and I'm sharing this story with you. There's so many trying, challenging, tragic, disgusting things that happen to people in the world. And for me, when we go through an experience like this, and it was experienced from 3 different minds, 4 different minds, and 4 different perceptions, and 4 different conceptions, that would be me, my sister, my mom, and the person who attempted that. He never was caught, so there might have been, I think there were other things that happened, and who really knows. So that's 4 different minds having different experiences of this thing. So the one I have no idea about, obviously. But for my sister and my mom and I, and my dad as well, my parents are together. They've been together now for forever, it seems. And when these things are talked about, they're talked about now in a story sense because they can only be a story. So you use these things in your life to understand, to go on sort of adventures of the mind, the emotion, into growth, into vengeance, stories of vengeance and forgiveness, so on and so forth. So for me, coming through this place, what happened was I lived for a long time with a kind of irrational fear, if you will. So you could say, but it's not too irrational, right? It seemed to be rational in the regard that, for example, when I would house sit for people when I was older, say when I was in my 20s, I could not sleep if I didn't go through the house and check everything, right? So when I would go into a bathroom, if there was a shower curtain and I was staying somewhere that wasn't my place, I would always make sure the shower curtain's open so nobody could hide behind it, right? So this was very normal for me. And there was a period of time, even into my early 20s, where I couldn't fall asleep, and I would often keep a knife under my pillow if I was sleeping alone and there was no dog in the house with me. And obviously, another aspect of this, now I'm jumping around a little bit to share with, is that I always said that I was raised by dogs. So I grew up with my best friends being dogs in some way. So that's a fairly true statement for me. But they're protectors in that way, right? If something happens, they'll bark, they'll do something. So to help you become aware, and to fall asleep without that was really difficult for me, if not nearly impossible. So I get to see and have that experience, and then you add on to these experiences growing up with women. I was always around women, that you see physical abuse in relationships, right? Bad relationships, teenage relationships that turn sour, and they're not necessarily physically abusive, but they're verbally abusive and emotionally abusive. And you experience other things yourself, right? Not only not seeing things, but you have guns put to your head, you have da-da-da-da-da, whatever the case may be. And it all happened. So I've had these experiences. So you're dealing with and experiencing the use of power over others, right? So one thing that I never talked about, I got initiated in my freshman year in high school, and it was terrible. It was so emotionally damning for me for a number of reasons. And basically, I'll share that because I brought it up and you might want to know. And it just really it was hard to deal with. So I was a freshman in high school, so that put me at 14 years old. And I had a friend who was a year older that I made at the high school, and he, to me, was more grown up, right? Stronger, more resilient. And this one day we were walking together, and school had already been out and everything was closed, and it was an outdoor, the classes were outside, not outside, but the doors were outside. So there were no halls or anything like this. So we're walking and we come around the corner, and there's this one guy who's a year, 2 years older than me. And he was just a real jerk. And here's the thing about it, and I shouldn't tell you this part because it kind of diminishes any kind of ill will you'd have towards him. But he was actually I found out later, and I had an idea that he was handled pretty roughly at home. So he had older brothers and then also abusive father, so on and so forth. And this is the case. I mean, you start to recognize this from a very young age when you start to open up your eyes and observe the world, that those who do a lot of abuse or abuse others generally are being abused by someone in some form or another. Not always, but this is often the case. So basically, like, I was with my friend who was friends with that guy in some vein because they were in the same age group, same year. So the guy was actually 2 years older, but he got held back a year. So he was in his grade, right? And they basically, the guy and not my friend, but the other guy and about 5 other guys gathered around me, and they made me count bricks with my nose. And my other friend didn't stand up for me, and I didn't want to do this. And it was getting to the place of like, it was going to be me fighting these guys. And at least that's how it felt, because they were threatening me basically with, like, severe bodily harm. So it's not fun, right? And so this is, your 14-year-old self. There's other aspects I should mention about, I didn't, because I don't want to take it too far into this rabbit hole. I won't, because there was another school I went to, got transferred from one school to another, from one better neighborhood to a worse school, where there was all sorts of really shady things happening. But anyways, so this happened, and you just watching somebody who's hurt abuse somebody else who they can physically, because they have the strength and they have the numbers, and they're hurting themselves inside. I mean, they're like hurting emotionally as well. So that happened, and you get to experience it, and it's just like, it's difficult when you're young. You don't know how to deal with any of these things. So you have these kind of traumas, and eventually you grow up and become stronger and stronger on your own and understand this, and you can stand up for yourself in particular ways. But I don't want to lose sight of anything that I'm saying here with that, because this too becomes a story, right? So you get to see like a friend back down who's afraid, doesn't stand up for you. So you get to go through those trials and tribulations and little you don't want to say, it's not like a little heartbreak, but it's like a little bit of something in you, like loses trust in people that you're supposed to be like a good friend, and now all of a sudden they're like cowering, or they're not the person that you assumed them to be, right? So you get to see all of these things like this. And now this continues to build and build and build. And particularly the thing that happened when I was 9 years old. And I'm certain, even to this day, I'll sometimes have dreams where I'm in that old house. And a strange one was, I'll just share with you since we're sharing like this now. I'm in the house where this happened, and I know there's somebody in the house, and I'm supposed to be alone. And I'm standing in my bedroom, and I'm not willing to open my door and go out of my room, but I know I have to because I can't see anything and the lights are off. And so in this one particular dream, which isn't a reoccurring dream, fortunately, but I've had other ones like this, I reach out into the hall to put my hand around the corner to turn the light on, but I can't reach it. And so I step out and turn it on. And right as I do, somebody lunges at me with a knife and stabs me. And then I fall back into the darkness and die. And then I wake up from that dream. So that happens a lot. Now, why am I sharing all of this with you? And why are we going on this journey of exploring physical abuse, physical Oh man, I'm teasing that apart for a moment, and the reason why I want to say it, because it's not even a physical abuse. It's not even a cycle. It's just sort of an assumption, a thing that just happens, right? That is allowed to happen. And the reason why I'm sharing this with you is to sort of open up a different way of seeing, for me personally, why I came to this place of developing one simple line of thinking that I think really changes the entire world if everybody would adopt it in some form or another. And it comes from all of these experiences and a gazillion experiences that I didn't share with you yet because I don't have the time nor the desire to take you back into these other stories. But it's this: if it's not consensual, it's not okay, right? If it's consensual, it's fine. I don't care. Like, I came up with, when I was in high school, this was my philosophy. Like, if you want to shoot heroin, it's fine, right? If you want to murder each other together and that's what you decide to do and you both consent, fine. If you want to commit suicide, fine. That's okay. But if it's not consensual, it's not okay. And I'm not saying these things are okay, right? I don't mind. I care about them, but this is just it. It's like, I don't want anyone to choose for me and tell me what I can and cannot do. And I feel like if I'm going to live that way, if that's what I want, then I must also grant that to other people. Because I do not want to manipulate another, not just people, but all living beings. Now, this comes to another place where I also had to do things that, when I was young, that showed signs of this sort of like becoming a more true philosophy. Like that idea of putting it as eloquently as I did, maybe it wasn't really eloquent, but a little bit messy. But this idea, like, if it's consensual, it's fine. If it's not, then it isn't. I didn't word it like that when I was younger in high school. I was understanding this for myself in that regard. But I never took it to the full extent, and I probably still have not, right? So there were other experiences I'm going to run through with this, because all of these connect in some form or another. All of these connect in a way that I think when we slow down, I know when we slow down and we actually look at it, they change the way we live our lives. They change the way that we see ourselves. We'll change the way, that is, we will change the way we conceive of our stories and our life and our existence. It's really powerful. And it's completely beautiful because it frees the others that were around to also live and express their life. So before I jump into that, I just want to talk a little bit more about this kind of strange bridge from having these experiences of being abused sometimes, physically and emotionally, also seeing men mostly use their strength to abuse women. The cases of rape, it's insane when you have a lot of female friends, how many of them have been not only raped, but groped and it's just crazy. Like when you look at it, and you talk and you have the conversations, it's just like, the numbers are astounding. I don't know what the numbers are, but it's just kind of wild. And it's kind of crazy to me. But anyways, I want to come back to another thing when I was young and some experience that I want to share with you, and to see if you can feel with me kind of this progression of understanding and sensation. And I remember when I first got a BB gun, oh man, when a kid gets a BB gun, you want to shoot things with it. It's the very nature of it. It's like, you don't want to learn. I used to box and still do sometimes. You don't want to learn to box and then never get to actually get in a ring. You just want to use it. It's a really strange thing. So with the BB gun, I did use it for a while, and we always had pigeons. And so there were pigeons where I grew up. So one day I took it out and I shot a pigeon that was on a light pole, on the power lines rather. And this is so terrible. I hate this feeling still. I mean, it's in me, and it is what it is. But I shot it and it tried to fly away. And as it did, it like spiraled in a circle and just like crashed down in the alley. And from the very moment that I let go that little pellet, the trigger, I felt disgusted by myself and my action. And I couldn't take it back. It was done. So I went into the alley and looked at the pigeon, and it wasn't, I don't remember this part either, because I remember it was hurt, but I didn't kill it. And I was wishing the best for it to recover. So, but it was definitely hurt, and who knows what happened then. But man, you have this experience, and it takes you on its own little ride, and you're feeling these things, and you're seeing like the abusiveness within yourself and the creature and animal that you are. It doesn't feel good, but it's there. And you still never make the connection, or it takes forever to make a connection, to take these things and experiences that we have and then branch them out beyond ourselves or the immediate event and experience that you're having. Why do I say that? Because I was still going off and fishing, and I was still eating animals, and I was still being a teenage kind soul at times, but sometimes, a little bit punkish. Well, sometimes a lot more. But it happens, and it's one of those things. I'm just being very honest and upfront with you here. So there's these other things, these kind of events that I think are important to share, and experiences to have, and to see a progression in one's own life and how it plays out. There were times when, for some time, I used to love fishing. It's so funny to think about these stories of myself when I was little, because they're so not who I am now, but they were part of an experience I once had. So it doesn't exist. In the nature of like really seeing the truth about reality, these things do not exist. I'm not who I was in 1,000 different ways, literally I'm not. But these little flashes of memory, like they turn in their own stories, and they weave in the ways that they do. So one time, I loved fishing, and I used to, it's irrelevant, but it's funny to me to think like I was the kid who loved, sometimes there was a period of my life, a couple of years, where I loved watching fishing on TV. I would watch it, competitive fishing. Who watches that? I did, so it was hilarious. And I had like the Bass something magazine. I don't remember what it was, but this one time my friends and I, we were all out fishing, and we're standing on the shore, and my friend, he caught a fish, and he just got out. He was in the military, but he was on leave, and he came back, and we were fishing, and he reeled in this fish, and it happened to get caught up in a tree that was in the water, but the tree was a third out of the water and the other 2/3 underneath the water, right, as the lake level rises. It was like this. So he was reeling in the fish, and the fish line was stuck in the tree, and the fish started coming out of the water, and then half of it got stuck in the tree, or half of it was in the water, half out, and then his line broke, and the line was stuck on the tree, and the fish was half in the water, half out of the water. I couldn't take it. It was so unacceptable. I was like, you have to go in the water. I was like, you have to go free that fish. This is ridiculous. So here we are catching the fish to kill and eat, and I'm like, you can't leave it. Like, you got to go out in the water. And you could hear, like, I believe it was a catfish, and it was going like, and they like kind of make this scream, and I'm not even doing it justice. And I was like, Mike, you have to go in the water. And he's like, I know, all right, I'll go. And so he goes and gets in the water and swims out and frees the fish and lets it go. And we all feel better about ourselves a little bit. And then he comes out, and he lost his wallet. He went and got into the lake with his wallet. And the crazy thing is you can't lose your military ID for some reason. If you lose your ID, he gets in trouble for, I don't know what the rules or whatever the regulations are. So we couldn't find it. So we went, and that was it. And then the next day he came back apparently with snorkel equipment, and went snorkeling and found his wallet, and all was fine in that regard. Nevertheless, so here's another thing I started coming to terms with. I'm remembering that there were these other events. I went hunting, and I didn't hunt, but I had a racist, bigotist, misogynist, religious phobic, not my grandfather, but my grandma's husband. And he loved to shoot things. And this big old dude called Big George, and he was big and domineering, and he abused his size and power all the time. There's a kind of funny story that I might have to share with you, because I think it is kind of funny how he went out and died in life. There's kind of an aspect of it like, good for you, George. But anyways, I went hunting with him. He took me out hunting, and I didn't have a gun or anything like this. And I do a very good job of getting lost in the forest and the woods, because I seem to be naturally inclined to not knowing where I am in the world. Anyways, that doesn't matter in this moment. But here we are in this landscape in, I believe, Eastern Oregon. Oregon is a beautiful state. The northwest of the United States is gorgeous. If you ever get a chance to go up there, please do, because it might change your perceptions and conceptions of beauty. And the natural world is just, it's mind-boggling in so many ways. It just, I don't know, it stuns. But anyways, here I was with these four, I think there were four people, and they're like, good old boy country, going out, gonna go shoot some things. And so here we are. I'm on this hunting trip, and I'm a meat eater and all this kind of stuff. And we're out, and Big G is like incapable of really hiking too much because, he's a former football player. I think he played in the Green Bay Packers way, way, way back in the day. And I'm walking around and just exploring the landscape. And then I see him. He's literally hunting. He's got his big, beautiful gazillion-dollar rifle laying on his shoulder, and he's on a lounge chair. So he just took a chair and put it out in the woods and sits there. This is hunting. Oh God, it's so absurd. And he just waits for the deer to come, or the elk in this case. It was spike elk, I believe is what it's called. And it's like a 1-year-old elk. And in the particular area we were at, this is what was licensed to be hunted. So anyways, eventually somebody got an elk. And I remember coming to camp, and they have the elk, and they shot it, and then they had to shoot it again because it didn't die. It wasn't him shooting; it was one of the other hunters. And this elk, this beautiful, beautiful animal, is being strung up by I believe it was like the tendon in the back heel, and then they lift it up into a tree, and then everybody gets around and get our picture taken with our thumbs up, like yeah. And I'm kind of doing that and disgusted at the same time, and I'm looking at this like, what is this? This is nothing in it felt right to me. There was like it was confused, and I didn't understand the bloodlust of it. I just didn't understand how we were celebrating the death and the killing, right? And I'm not saying I would have felt otherwise if it was more sacred and we were, like, dear Mother Earth, thank you for this, providing this elk for us that we just shot with this 80,000 caliber rifle while blah, 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 blah. But it just was disgusting to me. But guess what? I still ate animals. I didn't eat any of that elk, but nevertheless, there it was. So it's so curious to watch my own movements and gestating within me, and to see that I'm also watching people and their behavior. And I'm also, not only am I living a sort of semi-hypocritical life unknowingly, so it couldn't really be hypocritical, but it is if you actually step back and look. But I'm watching people really enjoy the power over other beings. Women, kids, and animals in particular. So they just get the brunt of it seems. In the most obvious ways. Men as well, absolutely. They get it too. And boys are going to be men at some point as well. But anyway, so I'm watching this and I'm seeing this, how it all just is what it is, Then there's the other parts of growing up, just like I love dogs. And I was totally in love with dogs. And if I had a spirit animal when I was young, it was the wolf. And I imagine many have the spirit animal wolf. And I loved gnawing on a big leg at Thanksgiving and eating the skin off of this bird that, I didn't ever saw it as a bird because we didn't ever see that part of it. We just saw it in the oven. And I loved that. But I had dogs, and I loved dogs, and they were my best friends. And those were the relationships I got destroyed the most when I was young, when they died. And I remember picking up one of our dogs. Our dog Cheddar, so beautiful. He had this strange mix of things like retriever and chow chow and some other things, and this beautiful red fur and a purple spotted tongue, and was so sweet and kind. And I believe we rescued him. I don't remember exactly. We got him from somebody that didn't want him. And just the most loving dog ever. And my parents were having the house painted, the outside of the house painted. And they told the painter, like, just don't let the dog out of the yard. And if the dog gets out of the yard, don't chase the dog. He'll come home. So what happens? I come home and I find out, I don't remember exactly how it happened, but I was told that I had to come quickly. Like, somebody called the house, and they were down the street, and I got in the car and went down the street, and I got there too late. And Cheddar was lying in this girl's arms, and she was just holding him. And that was the last I ever saw of Cheddar. And I had to take him and put him in the back seat of the car and drive him to the Humane Society to dispose of his body. And all I can remember is not being able to see anything because I had tears running down my eyes. Wow. I can almost talk myself into tears right there. That's intense. So, how curious. Ha. So I take Cheddar in the car to the Humane Society, and I could not, I just couldn't do it. I got there and I couldn't get him out of the car. I couldn't do anything. And the lady came out and she just saw it was a total mess. So this is so curious to me. So that was that. And then I got to experience that a couple times over in life. And as you can tell, it's a curiosity for me. Wow. So much beauty. The most beautiful things in life will cause you the most pain. This is how it is. So, there's that. And it continues on, and the more you observe and the more you watch, the more you see how people are... Oh, you probably want to know about Cheddar now that I'm sorry, I just left you there in that emotional little void. So the painter basically did everything my parents asked him not to do. So they let the dog out, and then once they did, they were like, oh God, we let the dog out. And so what did they do? They chased him. And they chased him, and the dog's not going to come to the people that was freaky scary to them. And they chased him and kept chasing him. And they chased him basically. He went running into one of the busy streets and got hit by a car. So that's how that happened. And it is crazy in animals. We had another two dogs, Bailey and Brie. Yeah, Brie with cheese and Bailey, the Irish liquor or whatever it is. Bailey's Irish cream. And yeah, something like this. And I've never seen two dogs love each other so much. These dogs cuddled, they spooned. You come walking down the stairs and they're on that square spot in the stair, midway when it turns, that has space, and they would be spooning there with each other. So friggin' cute. And basically so they were being house sat, and somebody let them out when they weren't supposed to, And in theory, right, if you train your dogs well, this shouldn't happen. But here it is. So anyways, I've never seen a dog so heartbroken because Bailey got killed and hit by a car, and that was terribly hard to deal with as well. Different for me than Cheddar, than just reliving whatever I lived. But, or seeing the story in myself and emoting in that way. My God, am I not a narcissist like I believed? No, but so I've never seen two dogs, a dog so heartbroken. So Brie would never accept another dog. It was so hard. She just wouldn't. She was very cold after that point with other dogs. So curious. So you feel with me right now, what's going on within me and what I'm seeing. I'm not trying to come with any kind of surprises. I'm just taking you through a journey into discovery for myself and what it became, and where I developed and thought about these things and how I experienced them, and why they brought me to a point of being able to come to a place where I'm seeing consent as the thing. And there's a reason why I'm actually making this audio. I've been getting really curious lately about, and this is a total segue and it's going to sound really strange, but I've always been really curious about the way we decide what is okay, what's allowed, what is morally correct, what is morally indignant, so on and so forth. And it's been fascinating to see how we're so blind and deaf to anything that we don't like or we find distasteful or that we've been brought up as something being wrong. And I'll just get to a really clear one here. And for me, one of the areas to me is prostitution. I look at it like this. I just can't understand why it's illegal, why it's wrong. Why is it illegal for people to use drugs when the data and so on and so forth is as it is? Why are we so, what appears to be absurdly stupid as a people, that we do things without actually being willing to see or listen to what is happening because of our actions that we're taking, right? So this is going to sound really flippant in some regard, but for me, it was so clear when I was young. I just could not understand this. And young, I mean when I was a teenager and a young adult as well. And I saw this, and now I'm going to say it right now, and it's going to sound strange, possibly, but I'll let it land as it does. I could not understand why prostitution was illegal. Why is it illegal to pay a woman or a man for sex, or to trade whatever currency it might be, or whatever the case might be? Maybe you trade them dinner. I don't know. Oh, wait, that's what we do all the time. That was so weird. See, this is my teenage self trying to figure things out, how society works. I mean, I can trade you dinner, and I could trade you an evening out and a return. Ah, I see. But what, can I just pay you? Nope. Like, okay, this is so strange. And now this is why it's really weird to me, because you talk to anybody, people who are just want to have you hook up, people who want to just, whatever the case may be. They're not looking for anything really necessarily beyond, having a good time with each other or having some fun. And so this is what they do. They play the game. Go out, buy some drinks for you, da-da-da. Maybe I see you again after. Maybe it doesn't work out. Maybe it's just da-da-da. I da-da-da a lot. But why is it that we can't connect that is in some sense paying for a service of a kind or another? Now, all of these are just labels, and they don't matter to me, to be honest. But it is a little bit strange and frustrating to see this. And I cannot for the life of me understand why we keep things in these boxes like this. And I think maybe part of me thinks sometimes it's because it's fun to keep things a little more dangerous, right? If prostitution's legal, is it as enjoyable for those who are partaking in it? I don't know. I haven't had the experience of prostitution, so I can't say. But for me, philosophically and pragmatically, it is what it is. So I don't think it would be any dangerous or, more exciting because it's supposedly illegal. I just don't live by other people's standards in that regard. But it's really confusing when you think about it and you try to understand these things and you start exploring it. And you're like, why is this all so confusing? What's going on here? Why do people not like this? Why do people decide that? Why is one person telling me they're environmentalist and I'm sitting here telling them, then if you're an environmentalist, perhaps you should look at not eating animals because animals are one of the biggest environmental polluters. Not the animals are, but that's because obviously, the demand for them. No, you don't know anything. Blah, blah, blah. So the arguments turn in circles. Like, we just don't want to know. And so this comes to this place of basically like asking uncomfortable questions because we don't want to, it's not even a perhaps, like we really just don't want to know sometimes. It's just easier. So when it comes to seeing all the abuse, and I could just go through a gazillion things, like watching people get murdered, not watching, but having friends that get murdered, women being raped, as I said, and abused or attempted to be raped, so on and so forth. It's just kind of crazy and chaotic, and it's a mess. So enjoy the mess as much as possible, but at the same time, I'm having a conversation with myself, and I can't have it with most people because most people don't want to have it. Most people just don't want to know. There's this very interesting progression that happens, not always, but often when people become vegan or they open their eyes to something. So people would say they become sort of fanatical or they become like a religious zealot of a kind when you see like something like this happening and you can't understand anymore, like why people don't want to look. George Orwell said it, right? The power of facing. I think this is I don't remember the context of it, but the power of facing. And it's a willingness to look at the darkness, willing to look at the things you don't want to look at, willing to have the experiences and share in conversation these things, and just to say it as it is. And I'm just going to come to this place right now with you. When I share these things, like I am in my own foibles. I am my greatest, best enemy and friend, if you will. That's just another story. I do have to have those mental battles as well with myself. It's part of it. It's fine. I call it laughing while crying, and I wrote about that somewhere else, and I won't talk about that here, but laughing while crying. It's a metaphor, but it's a real thing. I'll share. Okay. It's basically where you're suffering, and you're causing yourself the suffering, and in this sense, it becomes friggin' hilarious and so much fun. but you're laughing at yourself while you're crying, and you don't want to get out of the crying, or you don't want to get out of the pain. You don't want to get out of the dissatisfaction. You stay in it. You're there, but you know you're choosing to be there. You might not know why you're choosing to be there necessarily, or maybe you do, but you're holding on to it. You get out of it, you have a broken heart, and you keep listening to the music that you and your girlfriend or boyfriend, whoever, whatever the case may be, with that music over and over and over. You keep re-stimulating that, and you know it, and you're like, oh, I shouldn't do this. I shouldn't. Oh, it feels so good. Oh, no. You're living in the memory, you're living in the story, living in the conception within your mind. It's not true anymore. But yet you're causing yourself that suffering, and you're rewriting and looking at all those stories and feeling it as if it was so, just like I experienced with Cheddar, our dog. I just felt that, for me, But I see it for what it is, even though I am experiencing it, and I'm just like super hyper empathetic in that way too. So, where is all this leading? Well, it's going to keep leading down the road of looking and asking the question with each other and having the conversation. So, I want to jump to another aspect of this being vegan and why veganism is so wonderful for me, why I love it so much, and why some of the things that are a little bit of, you could say, a pet peeve, if you will. They're not so much, again, I have to balance this really strange landscape for myself of indifference and apathy and actually caring. And it looks like this, like I don't mind what you do, but I do care. And I'm not going to mind any, because the world's always been a mess. It will probably always be a mess. But we can live in a particular way that reduces, at least, much of the suffering that takes place in the world. And this comes to that point again, if it's not consensual, then I'm just not going to partake in it. And I wish nobody else would as well. If you consent to it, do whatever, fine. Non-human animals, they cannot consent. They just can't. So it is what it is. It's taking lives, it's using other beings for our own pleasure, it's causing suffering, so on and so forth. You can go online and see all of the other information if you want and listen to people talk about it for days. I'm not interested in that right now. I'm just having this conversation with you about it. Now, one thing that keeps getting thrown at me is like, why? It's still a question. Like, so many people want to know. Like, people are so curious about it still. So I went silent for so long and just wouldn't really talk to people about it. I still don't necessarily, because people will ask you about it, but they don't really want to ask. They're just saying something to say something, and that's really a curious thing. I have to say this. This was fun for me when I was first becoming vegan, and I think I was mentioning earlier about sort of this phase that people go through, sort of like not a militant, but sort of a fanatical, or it's not even a fanatical, it's just like you just see the truth and you want people to see the truth with you. And your family or whoever's closest is going to hear that truth. And you might not be very tacit in the way that you share that truth, but you share it nonetheless. So one of my family members, who I won't say, it was one of the most beautiful things to me, because she just straight away said, you know what, I don't care about the suffering of the animal. I want to eat it. I like it, and I'm going to eat it, and I don't care about the suffering. And it sounded like cold-hearted, but I was like, yeah. Damn. I was like, yes, you're saying it. You're saying what everybody else is behaving, but pretending as if it's not so. And in a strange way for me at that time, I just respected that. I was like, cool. I had a friend, for example, this is a little sideways, and there's a place in Tennessee as he moved to. He's black, and he moved to Tennessee, and from the West Coast there. And he said, man, I know racism's everywhere. I get it. He's like, but the strange thing is here. And I don't know if it's this way. This was a long time ago anymore. But he said to me, he's like, the thing is, you know who's racist and not, because they're just racist right out front, right to you. And he was so refreshed by it. He's just a really kind-hearted human being. And we just had a good time talking about this. And I was so curious. But I felt like that with her a little bit. I felt like, wow, you're really just saying it. Like, I wish everybody who participated in the suffering of others would just admit it and say, yeah, I'm wearing these clothes from some kid or woman who's basically being shackled down to a manufacturer somewhere in some country that's not our country. And yeah, that's cool. I got these pants and they look good on me, and they were cheap, right? So there's some kind of weird twisted beauty in that for me, of just like acknowledging at least what is. Telling the truth, like being honest. Why is it so friggin' difficult for us? Why is it so hard to be honest? Being truthful with ourselves too. This actually matters, because this comes to the way that we are with ourselves in the world. And so here comes a little fun place for me to play. It is amazing to me how many people will hold vegans to some crazy high standard. And, as if everybody who doesn't eat animals, or excuse me, everybody who does eat animals is so healthy and doing so well and so fit and so just on top of it. It's difficult to be fit. It's challenging. It takes effort to be fit and healthy, whether you eat animals or you don't, right? But this crazy high standard is just is hilarious to me. And it really is just probably people being able to like just push it aside so they don't have to pay attention to it or look at it. But it's as if every vegan isn't, some sort of Olympic level athlete or something, then the idea of veganism is defunct, right? And it's like, no, like, would you, I would be willing to take 5 years off of my life if I knew it was going to cause additional joy and happiness and a well-lived life for the majority of the population. The thing is, it's probably the opposite, and all the data that I've seen so far shows it's the opposite, right? That a plant-based diet actually leads to greater longevity, so on and so forth. There's some really interesting stuff that you can check out that I won't point to right here. It's really fascinating. So, but that's the case. It's just like, what is that? Anyway, so this kind of ridiculous high standard is so funny. And I'm sharing it here because I hope sometimes when I share things here that somebody would hear it, then I don't have to answer the question over and over and over and over again and have the conversation over and over and over again. Maybe I will, maybe I won't. But that's the case. And it's really interesting and curious to me. There's this other thing I call it sort of like the ice cream paradox. And it's when you meet a lot of vegetarians or people who were vegan or they tried it for a week here or there, and they're like, yeah, I just didn't have any energy, da da da. And then they're eating like, a pint of ice cream, and they're still overweight and they still look unhealthy and they're still suffering. They tell you straight away, like they don't even hear it almost. Yeah, I'm just still like, I don't know, I just haven't really figured out. I'm like, blah, 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 blah. It's like, really? So if you really tried something, and here's what I'm saying to this, like, okay, you tried vegetarianism. There's all sorts of issues one could take with that. I could as well. It's like they call dairy liquid meat because sometimes it's even a worse life for the cows. But the funny thing is in this regard is that you tried something and it didn't work for you. So you're telling me and you're saying to the world, but then at the same time, you're still in a bad place physically. You're still hurting in other regards. And you're eating things that aren't actually going to help you live a better, more healthy life, which is the argument you used against eating the plant-based diet, for example. So it becomes really weird. And it's just so strange to watch people's minds. And you might think like, man, Emmerich is really on this sort of pedestal tonight, just like the soapbox, just saying these. I'm not. This is really powerful to me because this for me is looking. This for me is seeing. This for me is kind of waking up. Whether you ate plant-based or not, it doesn't matter. That's not the point. But you're asking questions. You're living a particular truth. You're going deep into the nature of reality, into your own existence. You're really actually opening your mind in ways that transcends the conversation about this. I'm looking particularly at this conversation and using it for many different purposes. One, just to draw a line, just to be able to like look at the way we are in the world with each other. And for me, like I'm only here with you. So it's a conversation between you and I. And it's also a conversation I have with myself to ask the questions, to look, to do the work, right? To really want to know. So for me, making that choice to become vegan is it's powerful because it helped me resolve. Now I'm going to slow down here for a second, and I'm going to reveal something. I don't have a desire to like try too hard to like tie this all together into a story necessarily, or to get too much emotionally put behind what I'm saying, right? And that probably sounds a little bit strange to say that. Because it'd really be easy for me just to sound like I'm saying, do this, do this, do that. And maybe I am in some ways, and perhaps I am, but I'm also asking for the bigger question. I'm asking you the bigger question, and I'm asking for something more than that. I'm asking for it in all of your life, to ask the questions, to open up to seeing, and to stand up for your voice and your truth and your discovery and your understanding, and to do the work too. It's not really frustrating. I feel like when I say things like that, it's so frustrating. It's a momentary frustration, but then again, it's just like, you know what? I'm just going to let that roll off of me, because I don't let anybody else be in charge of my suffering, joy, or happiness in that regard, except for myself. But when I went vegan, for example, it forced me to ask all these questions. It forced me to do work. It forced me to be willing to stand up in front of my family and friends and others who were like, you can't do that. It's dangerous. It doesn't work that way. Right. So, I mean, I've been vegan for 17 years now, and there's some funny stories about it that I'll throw in here at the end, maybe. But it's definitely a challenge, right? There was a time about 12 years ago now, that I ate cheese and eggs for 3 weeks. And that was curious, because I thought I still believed in an idea. And see, I can't help myself but take you there. I believed in an idea called humanely treated animals. And so I went on this journey. I was working on an organic farm, and we had rescue chickens. And there was a farm down the street, and they didn't kill their chickens, their hens. And then later on, I found out that they killed their roosters quite frequently and often, because, well, they like to have they had their eggs fertilized, because apparently, fertilized eggs are better or something like this. But they were telling me, yeah, we don't kill it, blah, blah, blah. Of course they did. And, I went to Europe for a little bit, my first trip. And the family and the friends I was with, are like, no, our cows are here, treated really well, da 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 da. Yeah, and it ends up something just never was. I was never right with it in myself, and so I needed to do a little more research, and that's what I'm asking of you. So I went and did a little more research on my own. Right here, I was in Idaho, in the state of Idaho, becoming vegetarian, vegan 17 years ago. There wasn't a lot of this or that. And I didn't really reach out to anyone, because I didn't know anyone to reach out to at the time to get the information. But then I kept digging and I kept looking, and I'm like, something's just not right here. Like, I just can't understand it. Like, this is, and so I just said, no, other living beings are not ours to use. So if it's consensual, fine. But with, it's not. Now this might lead you to another journey. Another journey of starting to ask these questions, like, well, what about pets? What about this? What about that? What about that? So basically, you're arguing with yourself now to come up with your own right or wrong philosophical question. Don't rely on me to give you those answers. I know you won't anyways, but just go do the research for yourself. Have the experiences for yourself. Look at how power is used over others. I didn't get to the point yet where I wanted to talk about the manipulation of the mind and things of that nature, and how we use the subtleties there to get people to do things for us. All of this is connected in one way or another. All of the seeing, all of the playing, all of it is connected. But you have to decide and choose and see if you want to go in to explore that realm for yourself. I would hope that you would. I believe living a beautiful life includes doing this kind of work, and really seeing and experimenting with it and experiencing it for yourself and asking the questions. So I could go on and on and on. And it was a little bit of a journey, to start off with this idea and to share these things, these ideas, these actual experiences. And there's so many more that I didn't. They're all stories now. And so whenever I go back into Storyland, it can reify a part of me that it's just not true. It's not real. And these stories, though, however, they potentially can open up new realms of existence for you, for me, so on and so forth. So I hope that is it, that was valuable for you in some regard, and that you got to go on a little journey with me into the thinking and the experiences that I've had, that I know you've had and seen, because everybody I talk to in their own lives has had the experience of seeing somebody or someone sort of abused in some regard. And now here's another thing. I'm going to say this, and this is really probably not a great place to stop, but I'm going to end it here, because I think it actually is, it matters. You have to just look for yourself. You really have to go in and see and experience for yourself and then live your truth. And if you listen to any of my other audios that I did here, I take people to a baseline, right? So if you and I were to go again to that baseline, there's only one thing that we could ever know absolutely. And that is that you have awareness, that you are aware of something happening, of this experience. That's the only thing we can really know absolutely. So I always feel that it's best to err on the side of consent and doing what appears to be the right livelihood for you, the right way of living for you, right speech as well as if you want. And we're talking the Eightfold Path, and Buddhism does a really nice job looking at these ideas and putting them out there in words and a way to understand and experience for yourself. But it's up to you to go look and to really be honest and to really see, am I doing the best I can in this regard? Or am I fully falling flat on my face and being a total hypocrite? And being a hypocrite, it doesn't matter. I don't care about the other people. I care about you in regard to your existence and your life. It matters for you, right? I don't care about all the rest of it and what everybody else is doing in that regard. Just you and me, right here, right now, and in your life. So this is a quest I would love for you to go on. I think it's a worthy one. It's ever unfolding, it's infinite, and it's beautiful in that regard. And I think it would really, really be exceptional for you. And you'll come to understand and see things in ways and watch how people move, how people are in the world. In some sense, you'll be outside of it, even though you're still in it. And that's really quite curious. However, one little tidbit, one little warning maybe. You will feel the beauty and wonder, as well as the pain and suffering in life that is all around us more than most. It's inevitability if you start to wake up in some regard, if you start to pay attention. The level of empathy will just climb. There was something and that just reminded me, and I apologize for this, for going on for so long, but there's something that it reminded me of when that guy tried to rape my mom and attacked her. I dealt with deep levels of vengeance in my imagination because all I could ever fantasize about was being strong enough, being aggressive enough, being well-versed enough in taking another person's life in that regard to have attacked him and to have basically made him suffer and feel the pain and turmoil and darkness that one person's capable of putting upon another. I wanted him to suffer. I wanted him to hurt. And that ran through my imagination all the time. Like I'd go to bed at night and I would imagine myself chasing him, jumping over the wall that he jumped over, running after him, capturing him in the street. How would I kill him? What would I do? And so on and so forth. And at some point you just get to this place like, you know what? This is going to sound strange, but maybe it's a bit too revealing, but I don't have no problem. And I can't say that because I'm not in the situation, but there's a very real sense of being able to act out a level of vengeance on somebody without any hate or ill will toward them. It feels like that in me. I don't know that it's true because it would have to be experienced, but that in my mind is what I imagined. And that's how I feel. Imagine somebody attacking your daughter, your mother, or whatever the case may be. And imagine doing and having and confronting that person. You go in a weird way, and I know this is such a strange, twisted way to end this conversation, but you want to inflict pain and suffering on them, but not because you have hatred or anything like that, but because, I don't know, like maybe I just haven't dug into it enough for me. I think in some way there is a real sense of not wanting them to be able to do that to anybody else ever again. And the only way that you feel that you can make that happen, perhaps, is acting out that sense of vengeance. And I believe, this is why we love vengeance movies and other things and stories like this. But when I'm revealing and sharing something like this with you, it could be conceived of as quite vulnerable for me because it can be read and taken in 1,000 different ways. So I hope, again, like you being able to hear this and be here with me, you'll understand what I'm doing and digging at when I'm exploring these sensations, these thoughts, these emotions, these sort of machinations of my mind. And all of it matters in some regard, even though it doesn't in another. So I'll leave it at that. I hope that wasn't too intense for you. I hope you gleaned something from it. I hope, if nothing else, you it's a terrible thing. Like I just go on. I know it's a terrible thing because I want people to be full of joy, and I have to release that desire, because that desire sometimes causes its own suffering. It's like holding somebody and trying to shake them awake. Don't you understand? You're living in a dream. This is a nightmare. You're not actually in it. Wake up, wake up, wake up. It's like this. Wake up already. And I shake myself. Wake up already. All right. Ciao for now. And thanks again for being here on Questing the Unknown.
The podcast you just heard was recorded with Anchor. If you want to make your own, download the Android or iOS app completely free from anchor.fm/podcast. That's anchor.fm/podcast.